Welcome to Valemount Votes. This is VCTV's series of one-on-one interviews with the candidates for mayor, for council, for regional district area H representative, and also for school district 57, Robson Valley representative. We're here today with Andru McCracken, who's a candidate for mayor. Andru, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Michael, I appreciate the opportunity.
Great. Well, I'm glad to have you here. We're going to start today by just kind of getting to know you a little bit. So why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself?
I moved here as a young man of 26. I got a job at the local newspaper. I've run a newspaper, and since I moved to Valemount, I've been fascinated with it. Lately, I have a family. That's been a big new chapter. Valemount's always been continuing to be exciting for me, and so now I have a 2-year-old. Having a 2-year-old is also exciting, constantly exciting. And when I moved to Valemount, I recognized something here that I was missing in my life, sort of sense of community and a great place to be. And I like that people know me, sometimes for good, sometimes for ill, but I really appreciate being in a community where I'm known. And yeah, it's
great.
It's a great place.
Well, nice little snapshot there of you. So we're giving all the candidates 3 minutes, up to 3 minutes, to make an opening statement, opening remarks. And when you're ready, if you just want to speak into this camera over here,
sure,
just go ahead.
Do you mind if I just look at you?
You can look right at me if you like.
I get cross-eyed when I look right at the camera.
Absolutely, yeah. So. Whichever you like.
I moved to Valemount in 2001, and like I said, I was 26 years old, and I started as a reporter. Later, I started my own newspaper. I've been a business owner for 5 years, a reporter, editor, publisher. I did a little time at the station. And in 2011, I had the privilege of being mayor. Being mayor was a big job, and I didn't have a lot of experience. I'd been paying attention to council for 10 years prior as a reporter, a journalist, and at the TV station. It was a big transition. I just want to talk a little bit about my time as mayor. I'm pretty proud of some of the things that we did. We refused to raise taxes or utilities. When staff asked us to do that, we said, look, there's got to be a more efficient way of doing it. And there almost always was. We raised taxes a little bit for cost of living, but no more. And my term wasn't perfect, but I learned a lot. And I'm excited to be running for mayor because I think I've got a lot to give back to the community. I'm running because I don't think this council has tackled the biggest issues facing Valemount. I'm going to describe some of the things that they haven't done in my introduction here, and I'm going to describe a little bit about what I do differently, and I want to sort of demonstrate my style. One of the things that council struggled with is a CAO, Chief Administrative Officer. It's a really important job. It's the most important job in the village office.
We are going to talk about that. I have that as one of my questions.
They run the day-to-day operation of the village. They implement village's council, and they advise council. And council made a big error when they spent $20,000 to assess the CAO's performance when they first got in office. What happened was they found this CAO competent, and then they fired her. And that sent a really bad message to CAOs across the province, and as a result, it's been difficult to retain, attract talented CAOs to this community, and that's a problem because council can't have their vision implemented if they haven't got a top person at the staff. They sent a pretty clear signal to the province that Valemount was not a safe place to work. You can see it's had an impact on our village. It's part of the reason that council has no policy for this cannabis thing coming up. It will soon be legal, and there's nothing in place for the village. CAO helps with that. They take the best practices from around the province and put it into play. As mayor, my first move is to address this, to build a stable team, to attract good talent, which we've had success with before. This council says that housing is a major issue now, just as we're going into the election, but there's a problem with that. They developed a community committee of volunteers, and the volunteers put their heads together and came up with some great ideas. They brought those to council, and council didn't take those up.
Sorry, I'm going to have to give you about 10 more seconds.
Okay. Being mayor takes courage, and it means addressing these issues. And that's something I think I can bring.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
I
Awesome.
want to honor the 3-minute mark.
Well, we'll have lots of time to discuss quite a few of those things that you talked about, our questions in this, so we'll get a little more meat on those bones as we go along.
Okay.
So first topic we're going to discuss is housing, because it seems to be the #1 topic facing Valemount people right now.
Sure.
We're experiencing a housing shortage, as you know. It's affecting home buyers, it's affecting renters, seniors, basically anybody who's looking for any kind of affordable housing. Some are even calling it a housing crisis. It's a serious situation. Makes it difficult for not only the locals to find housing, but for those people who are moving to Valemount and for those who may be considering employment here. I've heard stories about people who actually have turned down employment because they couldn't find housing or they couldn't find suitable housing. And that's a difficult situation. As you mentioned, the current council has taken some action on this. They struck the Affordable Housing Committee back in 2016 to deal with data collection, strategic planning, zoning, bylaws, that type of thing. And then most recently, perhaps about 6 months ago, they agreed in principle to provide some land for an affordable housing project in a location to be determined. So we have two questions on housing for you. The first one is, what do you believe is the role of municipal government in addressing the housing issues we have been and will continue to face? And after you talk about that, we'll discuss ideas that you have on housing.
So the role of the municipality is pretty clear. We set the rules about building. We set the rules about what can go where. And so we have the opportunity to say yes. We have the opportunity, we can either discourage or encourage development. We can encourage good use, we can encourage basement suites and solutions within the community, or we can turn them down. And I think we need to start saying yes. We need to start saying yes. I think we need to invite people here as a #1 to say, are you interested in helping us tackle these problems? So the village has a huge role as almost as a restrictive component. They can do a lot to hurt the housing thing. Typically they don't do a lot to actually build. Like municipalities, for some reasons, don't actually own housing complexes. If they do, they have a nonprofit associated with the village and they run things.
Right.
The role for the village, though, is pretty clear. Get out of the way, encourage development, help solve this problem. It really requires Valemount developing a culture of yes, to saying, yes, how can we get you here? Yes, how can we help you? Help us solve our problems.
Right. And how does that fit with what's in the OCP in terms of, what has been envisioned for the village in terms of how it's doing? Or does it, it's time for a review anyway. It's overdue, a review and a rewrite of the OCP. So
this council wanted to open up the OCP, the Official Community Plan, which is a document that sort of says what goes where, and it talks at some level, a higher level than most of the way that council talks about where we want to go. But during my time, council developed one higher level plan. It's called an Integrated Community Sustainability Plan. We used grant money to get that study done. And funders said, you have to do this study because we need to know where you're going. And OCP still is down in the weeds, the community level plan. It's about what can go where. It's very technical. The ICSP, we had 20 volunteers volunteer time and time again, put countless hours into developing this document, and it has something better than an OCP. It's a vision for Valemount, and what they say is Valemount needs affordable housing. Valemount needs good, solid housing. We don't want people, yes, people can live in terrible rundown rentals, but we don't want that. We want to help fix that problem. And I'm proud to say that we brought lots of people into that discussion. In fact, Councillor Peter Reimer was one of the people who helped us bring that to bear. What's such a struggle for me is that was not referenced once by this council. Nobody knows about that document. It's as if it's buried.
I was just going to say, what's happened to it? Because I have not heard a mention of it in 4 years.
It is there, and it's actually in force, and it has some legal bearing on what council does. That is, if council makes decisions contrary to that, it presents a bit of a challenge. I'd like to go back to that document. I'm proud of what was happened. There are a lot of studies that I don't like, but the ICSP spoke to I think the most challenging, knotty issues. And if I'm up on some of the issues that are facing Valemount, it's a result of some of the work that's done in that study.
All right. Okay, well, let's get on to what you think that council should be working on over the next 4 years to address the housing issues that we're facing, and what specific plans would you bring to the table in terms of what would be done if you're elected?
You know, I think the first one, just let me say, Valemount is a dynamic, amazing place. People want to be here. People from all over Canada are wanting to come here and play at our bike park. They want to come and experience the brewery. It is really a destination, and it's not just a pit stop tourist destination, pull over the RV. It's like, I want to come here and spend some days. I believe that people who develop apartment buildings as well would like to come here and spend a summer building an apartment building. Valemount has jam. We are a cool community. Let's get people who have the vision and say, I want to make a contribution to this community. It's cool. Maybe I won't make as much money as building something in Leduc, but I don't want to be in Leduc. I want to be in Valemount, where every day after work I can ride my bike or go snowmobiling or go up and do a backcountry ski tour in these amazing mountains. So I think people are underestimating just how popular Valemount is, and there's an opportunity here to exploit that. It's not just about, we're not all waiting for the resort to happen. Some of us are really excited to be here right now.
Right, right. So how do you go about attracting those people?
A weekend developers conference, that's what I see would be a really good thing. Get a good keynote speaker, have them in, sell the attributes of the, you know, maybe having an event at the brewery, maybe one of the local restaurants, good food, smart conversations, and then have some projects, some big hints for projects ready to go to say, hey, we've got this land here. We're looking at doing a new apartment with an affordable housing component to it. Do you want to help us make this vision? Because a lot of people want to be a part of Valemount.
Right.
There's another component here, and you'll have to tell me how much time I've got left on this question.
Well, there's no time. We're kind of going with these questions as they are.
Oh, I'm going to talk for too long.
Well,
I'm sure of it.
Well,
no, but
I do have to move on eventually. But
okay, no, but let me go on. So this is a big one. So right now, if somebody built on Fifth Avenue and they put in, say, they wanted to build a distillery. Say somebody they had a vision for a retail store, and they wanted to build it and put some residential above it. Right now, the existing bylaws say that they can put one unit on top. So a 10,000 square foot building could possibly would have one unit on top of it. It was brought to council's attention, and it's one of the things that it's about just cleaning up your own work before expecting other people to come and help you do with yours. Right. Council's got a lot of things like that. Another one is housing footprint. I mean, what we see is hordes and hordes of young families coming here, and they're happy to live here and they're happy to come, but they're struggling with affordability. And what I see is, it's been a part of Valemount's way, is you come, you build modestly, and then you expand when your family is ready to expand. And I just think that is so smart. Let's reduce the building footprint so people can afford to start building. I also, like Nathan Smith has been talking about, setting aside land that only people who live and work in Valemount can bid on. I want to just, you know, it's hard to do things like that, but I think he's onto something. The idea is Valemount shouldn't be competing with every investor. Valemountonians shouldn't be competing with every investor everywhere in the world that wants to own a piece of a little beautiful mountain town. We need some stuff for people who live and work on a Valemount scale. And so let's carve out a little piece of Valemount to help them get started. And I think this is a huge idea. I'd love to see rentals. I'd love to see part of the housing market, just a small part of it, taken off of the speculative market, the open market, and say, for these things, these houses and units that have been built, these ones, they're bought and sold for the cost of building, plus a cost of living increase. It's an elegant way of helping people move to your community, live here and make an investment here, and not walk away empty-handed, right? Because if you've been paying rent all those years, you're not building a nest egg to help you with your next place. So this ownership piece is a very unique
How do you stop people from taking advantage of that, though? Because presumably you would do that to make it affordable housing, right?
Yeah.
And you would perhaps put covenants on the resale so that you couldn't flip it for, you know, twice what you paid or 3 times what you paid, because otherwise you're taking the affordability aspect out of it. And then there are people who would come in and say, yeah, you know, I'm going to do this because I can get cheap housing in Valemount, and they have money to purchase something else, but they're abusing the systems.
Oh, no. Okay, so, you know, Valemount is not not the first community that's faced these problems, and I'm amazed at what's out there. It's these plans have been written already. So one, you might be surprised, Whistler has a good plan for this. They have a housing authority, and that housing authority, basically what they do is they own this, they manage this housing, and they make sure that doesn't happen. So in a sense, it's not like free market housing. It's a little bit different. That if your neighbors notice that you're gone for 6 months, you violated the terms, and people sort of self-enforce this idea. It's a managed thing, and it takes a different set of rules. But we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. And I would say, you know, that might sound scary and too big, but you always start with the first step. And getting into it, beginning this, we could start on a very small scale. And you know, I'm sure there are people who would say, that's not a good plan, we're not going to see success with that. Let's indulge them, you know, let's do a small, build a small development and see how it works out. And if it's successful, then we can move forward.
It's quite a shift from the current council's position, which I recall hearing numerous times, which was, it is not the role of municipal government to be involved in housing. It is the provincial and federal governments that, you know, we don't have a stake in there, we don't have the money for this. I think the will of the people is changing in terms of this, because housing affordability has to be something that's mandated, whether it's a housing authority like they have in Whistler that's managed by the municipality, or whether it's a nonprofit housing society that does it. The village, the town, the city, they have to be involved in the process, I believe, in order to make it work.
Right. Well, you know, at one point that was an accurate statement. Back in the 1990s, that was perfectly accurate. It was not the role of local government to be involved in housing. And now the province is asking municipalities, can you please take a role in housing? Because it's such an issue. Right. And like we talked about before, the municipality, they control a lot of what results in affordable or unaffordable housing. So times have changed with the introduction of the new legislation for municipalities. We used to be under the Municipal Act, and now we've gone into the Community Charter. The Community Charter is pretty specific that municipalities can do a lot. They can do a lot to serve their communities. Where there's an opportunity to serve their community, they are welcome to work. Right. And it's unfortunate that we're so stuck in the past that we're unable to see there's not just an opportunity here, there's a responsibility.
Yeah, I agree. And I think people may not understand how this works, but one of the biggest impediments to people purchasing is the land cost. So if the village, if a municipality comes in and purchases the land and holds that land in trust, you can buy a unit, or you can buy a house on that piece of property, and it cuts the fee from $200,000 to $100,000 or less, depending on what you're doing there.
When I first came into office, it was that the previous council's goal to liquidate their land holdings. They felt we would be better served if those lands were held by private people, because the idea was hopefully something would be built there and we'd be able to collect taxes on it. I recognize that as a red herring, because I've witnessed in Valemount over my time here, people love holding land here because they think Valemount's going to go through the roof. And so it's an opportunity for speculators to, and in that case, it's a negative speculation.
Right. Let's move on to some of the other areas of housing. I don't want this discussion to be all about housing, because there's lots of other things to talk about. But we do have, I mean, we've talked about affordable housing, but there's social housing, there's First Nations housing, and then importantly, there's seniors housing, right? Those areas there as well need consideration. I mean, we spend a lot of time talking about affordable housing for people, which is great, and it's needed. But we do have a housing situation, a housing shortage for seniors in the community. There is no transitional social housing per se for women fleeing abusive relationships and that type of thing, First Nations housing. So it's a pretty broad sphere that we need to look at, and I think perhaps we need to take a step back and say, you know, it's not about one thing, it's not about two things, it's about 4 or 5 different things, and how do we create this as an umbrella? And we have people working on it, the Senior Citizens Housing Society, you know, they've been experts in this, they've been doing it since the 70s. Are they being consulted, right? Are they being, you know, are they being brought into the equation? I don't know.
Well, we've seen the seniors, I don't want to The seniors is a really important one for me. They built this community. They are a part of this community. And what's really frightening is people who were in their 40s when I moved here are now seniors. And I noticed that some of them, despite having deep connections to the community, are choosing to move away. And I can't help but see that on the seniors to get in, there's a 12-person waiting list. You know, there are about 20 units of seniors housing in Valemount, and we have 12 people waiting to get in. It's a travesty. We need to get on it. When I was speaking to Dee McCracken, she is the president of the Valemount Seniors Housing Society. She is ready to build more senior housing. I mean, I don't want to say ready, and I don't want to commit her to anything, but she sees the need, and she is equally concerned with people moving away. But I want to speak to all of these concerns about low income, about shelters for abused women, you know, who need a place for respite, and places for seniors, and places for young families, and places for low income. There's a common thread here. It's building. Right. It's building. We need to build. We need to build like mad. And
what a great problem to have, right?
It is a great problem to have, and you know what? One of the side effects is that it creates jobs. Now, lots of communities are in a similar situation and want to do this, but none of those communities are as cool as Valemount, and we need to work that angle. Honestly, we need to be like, you're a small construction company, bring your crew to Valemount and have the summer of your life, and let's build. And I mean, I just want to acknowledge we've got great builders in this town, and I think one of the things that's hung us up as a community is new legislation from the province is really making it difficult for those builders to do their stuff. They used to be kind of spec builders. That is, somebody would say, I want to build a house, and they would be the general contractor for it. And that's gotten really complicated because now the general needs to hold a lot of liability insurance, and they're saying we can't do this because they don't do enough to make it profitable. Just a word on this and sort of a policy position on my part. What we see in this instant is we've got a one-size-fits-all policy from Victoria, and we can't have that. This council needs to be lobbying. When they go to UBCM, what are they doing? They need to be saying, hey, do you know you've stopped independent house building in Valemount? Get on that. We have a housing crisis. Get things moving. Yeah. So, look at encouraging building, getting rid of outdated bylaws that are preventing people from doing cool things, like building multiple units on top of commercial. You know, so imagine if you're a senior and you live in a small building and you get to be right in the middle of town, you know. And these things already exist, and we know that they work well, like above the home hardware. There is a group of dedicated individuals that want to move this file forward. And so from my perspective as a council, I think the most important thing would be empower the nonprofits who are already working on this. They are trying to solve this problem. They're getting best-in-class advice from the province. It's an issue for the province too. What it seems to me is that everybody wants to do something about this except the previous council. And now that there's an election, they're saying we want to do this too. I want to tell you, if you want to watch a council meeting that will maybe make you sad or even angry, is watch the one when they dealt with the recommendations from the Housing Committee, because they are not in touch with what's going on in Valemount. They don't. I'd just like to say one more piece on this. It's a passionate one, and I would really love to be the mayor that helps build Valemount. You know, I would like to work with the people in this community and say, let's address this problem and build amazing buildings and build up the town, build up the tax base.
Okay.
I lost my train of thought.
That's
so
okay.
Sorry.
I need to move on.
I was on a big
anyway,
roll.
yeah.
Let's move on.
Yeah,
thank you.
No, thank you for that. That's really in depth. Let's talk about economic development / economic diversity. So, I mean, it's no secret that we've been talking about it now. Homes are being built, homes are being sold, new businesses are opening in town. Tourism's been on the rise for a number of years. However, there's a lot that can be done to foster growth on the other side, on the business and industrial side. Mm-hmm. not necessarily big business or big industry, but on those particular sides. So we have two questions on economic development and diversifications. The first one is, it's kind of a bread and butter question, and that's what are your ideas for stimulating economic development in Valemount, just as a general guiding principle, and then we'll talk about specifics.
Okay. I want to walk the line between being truthful, but I don't want to be a braggart here. As mayor, during the last term, people came to us with business ideas, and we looked at them and said, what does this do for the community? What are they asking us to do? And how does that achieve our goals? And in almost every instance, we were like, wow, here's somebody with an idea. And if we can modify the rules that we have in place, we can accommodate them and create more jobs. So I'll give you a couple cool examples. First one's dealing with entrepreneurs. A man came to us and said, I'd like to open a brewery. And we looked at our rules and we said, look, we haven't got anything available for you. And we went through a process with him of saying, like, what is required, and then we thought about what we needed as a community, and we had really good staff at the time who did great research on breweries, including problems that breweries have in certain areas, and what some of the conflicts might be and how to manage those. And we came up with a good policy, and we said yes. There's a food truck. A guy called us up in the fall, at the end of summer, and he said, I bought a food truck. Where can I put it? And we scrambled. And I think to the rest of the village, we must have looked like idiots, because it took us 3 months to get our act together. But honestly, that is as quickly as you can move to change the laws, because there were specific laws banning that. And so we went in there and changed those rules to say yes. We also accommodated other feedback, other concerns about where he would be located. Would he be on public land? Would he be on private land? And we tried to consider. So I want to say two things. We said yes, and we said, how can we do a good job with this, right? And when you've got great staff, you can do a good job with it. I'm really pleased to say that we said yes to the brewery and yes to the food truck. We created a culture of yes. When a young man named Andreas Tony was doing a project, a bike park outside the village, he was looking for support from the village, moral support. I mean, I knew about it. I knew about what was happening, and went to his aid to say, you've got a good idea here. How can we help? What we did as a village is we used our push. When we went to UBCM, we said, when we went to the appropriate meeting with the Ministry of Forests, who are responsible for parks like this, we said, look, we have this thing coming forward. And it's not the only thing we're here to talk about, but one of the things we like to see is, how can you accommodate this? So it wasn't within the village limits, and it wasn't really within our purview, but we saw that it was a benefit to the community, and we saw that there was tremendous potential there. And so we said to, let's just say, it's not just us saying yes as a village, but creating a culture of yes. Like, how can we all work together to help Valemount get ahead? And
right.
That's what I'm proud of.
Okay, well, saying yes is fine if you have people coming to you with ideas, but
yeah.
The other side of that is, how do you attract business to see the potential that they have here? Then they can generate their ideas and bring them back to you. What's the process that you feel we should be going through for that?
Yeah, it's always a moving target. If I could reflect on my experience from last time, we had a community forest in the past. I want to be careful not to make this too long, but two of the things that I championed as mayor, and one I got done during my term, which I think is pretty remarkable for a 3-year term to actually have an idea, take root, and actually be executed, was to buy the old mill property and turn that into the Valemount Industrial Park. It was a long play. We didn't have business there right away. For a lot of years, it just sat open, a vacant field, a weed field. Right. But what the understanding was, is if this mill was sold the way that the owners were talking, that is, we're going to sell this in for to be a commercial enterprise. We think somebody who wants to open a hotel would love to have this view of Canoe Mountain. Wouldn't that be remarkable? For me as mayor, I thought, this is real trouble. We'd done a study about the amount of industrial land in the valley, and there's not a lot. And So we moved to secure that land. It was a long play, it was a strategic play. But now, when businesses want to come here, they can come and talk to us. In terms of reducing taxes or whatever, that area is not actually in the village, so it's not something we can do. But what we can do is offer property at good rates. I want to be careful not to take too much credit away from the community for us, because they're the people that actually did it. But I am going to say, being a champion for the Valemount Industrial Park, I think made a big difference, and I was really happy to be able to cut the ribbon, I think on my last day in office or something like that. Making sure we have the ability to play in industry, that's an important move. And I think as we look into the future, marketing that piece of property and the potential there is going to be a huge one. Like I say, I think people are really attracted to Valemount, and Valemount is gaining a workforce, right? That is if they could work and make good money here in Valemount year-round, they would be here in an instant because they love this place. Instead, they're off in Alberta trying to make money, trying to keep the family alive. So that is an aspect that I'd like to see continued. We need to promote Valemount as a place for small industry. Small industry, big industry. I mean, it's in the eye of the beholder.
Okay. I want to get the other part in, although I think you've covered it fairly well, but maybe you have something else to add to it, and that is, what's your definition of economic diversity, and how do you see it unfolding here in Valemount in the future?
I'm just going to run with your question and say, we've done a great job with tourism. I think we've demonstrated how you can go from zero to hero. I mean, we are knocking it out of the park with tourism. And frankly, with the bike park, with that aspect of it, we're changing the nature of tourism. We've got people that, they're not here to just come and see, and they're sort of disappointed with local culture or something like that. They're here to participate, and they're like, who are these people that do this stuff? This is great. It's like, it's sort of an authentic experience to come to Valemount. And I've met many good friends, and I have to say, people at the bike park, to a person, most of them are considering moving here. I'm not saying that they will, and I'm not saying that they can, but it's that kind of vibe. And now, a lot of these people, like one guy I met at the bike park the other day is a refrigeration technician based out of Prince George. He was here working on the arena. There is the possibility to attract these people, to attract people in industry. And if you take a look at what we have right now, we actually have a small shop that does helicopter piece repairs. Mm-hmm. It's kind of an interesting game for Valemount. You can see strategically why it works. Helicopter parts are very, very expensive. They can be remanufactured here. And so the cost of shipping and the time delay doesn't really matter. These things are worth a lot, and once they get fixed, they're going to go. It's not like an overnight kind of thing. Right. It's like it's more of a sort of refurbishing things. That is a great industry for Valemount, and so it takes a little bit of heads-up play. I think throwing open the doors and trying to attract industry en masse is a good plan. I do, and I think. You try to present yourself well. It's a very similar play to what we've done with tourism. A little more focused, but a similar approach.
Well, that's it. I mean, that's no different than any other community. I mean, you talk to any mayor of any community, they say, well, of course, we welcome business all the time. That's what we do. However, niche marketing is the way to go, and selling the assets that you have here and quality of life. I mean, what other community has Mount Robson, a world-class ski hill, a world-class bike park within 20 minutes drive of, not
to mention a beautiful lake in the fall.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So there's all those things in there. Okay, well, let's move on then.
Are we going to speak about the proposed ski resort at some point? Because I want to take that one head on.
I hadn't planned to, but I could give you a minute here if you'd like to.
Yeah. I think it's important to be strategic when we talk about these projects. During my term as mayor, I really tried to keep the cat in the bag. It's because I saw the destructive aspect of pumping up a town, basically creating a lot of hype and excitement about a project that really isn't underway yet. I saw that during Canoe Mountain. I was not impressed. There was a similar, a smaller blip with Sass Bay. With the Valemount destination, the Glacier Destination ski resort, we've made a mistake. We've promoted something that hasn't actually started yet. I support the resort. I want it to be successful, and I want us to manage the impacts in a proactive way. But the kind of hype that we've seen only benefits people who are leaving Valemount. It allows them to sell their property or their home that they're leaving at a high rate. The impact in the community, we're feeling it. It's part and parcel of the housing crisis. I had wished for the last 4 years we kept that lower profile. As mayor, I asked the people at the resort to do that, and they were willing to. It was a concession on their part, but they were like, okay, we understand this. We understand what happens, how destructive speculation can be. And so they're willing to work with us. And I don't think the options were off the table for this council. It's something I feel really deeply about. And to be honest, I don't know what can be done, but I think if council just would focus on what it is that we have going for us right now, what makes this a great place for families and people that want to live here, and what makes it such a good community, rather than the untapped potential or the future promise of, then I think what it does is creates a space for families and people to live here right now.
Sure, I would agree with a lot of that. I think, however, that once you dangle that golden carrot in the air, it's human nature. You know, we all look towards that as, oh, this is something exciting. I mean, this community has been very excited about that process from the very beginning and has been on board with it from the very beginning for the most part. And those people who are still living here have benefited quite dramatically from a large shift in property increases, right?
You know, I don't hear that universally. I think for some people, the skyrocketing property prices are a bit of a concern. Like, for instance, I've heard people say, we're looking to upgrade, and now we can't afford to.
Yeah, well, I would agree with that, and I'll tell you my own personal experience. I came here in 2013. I could have bought a lot pretty much anywhere in town for about $30,000.
Yeah.
Now it's about $90,000.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I could have bought a house pretty much around the $100,000 mark. Now it's around the $300,000 mark.
Yeah.
You know, so I understand that, but you can't have growth without some growing pains, right? That they go hand in hand, and I understand you want to make sure that people don't get too focused on the pie in the sky because of what's happened here in the past. But it's kind of hard. What's the old saying? Once you've seen prairie, it's kind of hard to go back to the farm.
I have to say that I disagree with you. I think council shows leadership in the community, and I think I'm not saying let's depress housing prices, but I think if, Michael, if you look at the trajectory of where housing prices are going, council has a role to play in sort of keeping expectations real. If you want to, you can play it both ways. You can say, wow, this is going to be the greatest thing that ever happened. Or you could say, hey, we're wondering where this project is, and we're disappointed that it hasn't taken root till now. We need to address that issue head on. We can't flirt with that one. And one of the ways to influence things overall and make a big difference is to carve out a small amount of Valemount for just exclusively for people that live here and are committed to living here long term.
Sure, I mean, that can be done. I'm really not clear on what you would do to kind of put the cat back in the bag that's 3/4 out of the bag now. You know what I mean? I understand what you're saying. You know, by council promoting a project, it creates speculation and it creates increased costs, et cetera, and that's not been good for people, including myself. However, I'm not sure you could turn that around at this point. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd like to take on that challenge, to be honest.
Okay, all right. Well, let's leave it there. Is that good? We can leave that there?
Right. Yeah, thanks.
Let's move on to air quality. So, according to the BC Lung Association's 2017 State of the Air report, Valemount had the worst measured air quality in BC, in all of BC in 2016. That's the most current data that's available, with nearly double the provincial annual average objective for PM 2.5 emissions, exceeding the provincial baseline of 25 micrograms per cubic meters on 72 out of 365 days in 2016. And in that year, there were no wildfire-related smoke advisories issued by the province. So the question for you is, do you have a plan for addressing this important health concern of poor air quality for Valemount? And if you do, could you please provide some actions, specific actions you would recommend to help alleviate the situation?
I'm going to be frank and honest here, Michael. On every other major issue, seniors housing, affordable housing, youth, we have great nonprofits that are doing work to this end. So they're researching best practices and they are taking an initiative. On this one, I don't know if it's because it's such a gnarly topic, so naughty, like in the sense that because for whatever reason, we don't have that. And I just want to say, I wish we did. I wish we had leaders in the community who are working on this, a nonprofit, about clean air. I think what needs to be done, there's a couple things. Well, just before I get into potential solutions, I just want to acknowledge something. Without wood heat and without a fantastically efficient home, heating in Valemount is incredibly expensive.
Of course.
And we are on a completely different level than any other community who is serviced by natural gas. Ironically, one of the reasons we're probably not served by natural gas is because of Kinbasket Reservoir. Our community has taken a lot of slings and arrows for the rest of the province. I could get into those, but I think if we look at the province's commitment to health and their purpose for being, I think if we brought those up right to the province and made a thing, I think, to me, the easiest way to approach this is to have a second rate for heating, for electricity. It is an issue that has tremendous health costs associated with it. The BC Lung Association goes into this in great detail. We are causing hospitalizations. Taking away people's wood stoves without a cost-effective replacement is not an issue. It's not on the table. We can't make Valemountonians more poor than they already are. In the sense, I know there's been a plan to bring natural gas here. I'm not sure about that. One thing I'd like to see is the community forest has plans for a mill. One amazing thing that they could do is if they developed a pellet plant, that would be a great solution. It would secure a supply of cost-effective fuel for the community, and pellet stoves have dramatically less emissions. So that's a really positive, and not only that, that's a big job creator. So that's an approach I would like to go on. I think this issue of air quality, there are some other components to it. I have a friend in forestry who messaged me after the forum last night. And he said, Andrew, nobody's talking about burn piles in town, forestry's burn piles. And he identified that this is a waste of a resource and that it's being burnt, it's polluting our airshed, and it's having a dramatic impact. Burning a pile of wood is way worse than heating your home with a wood stove. Way, way worse. And yet that's happening. And under the last council, it's happened with the permission, the express permission of council. I mean, we're all in favor of progress, but not at the cost of health of our community. Right. So we need to be smart on that. And I mean, I don't want to shut development down. I don't want to make it so expensive that people can't clear new land and find a way to get rid of their wood. But we have to be smarter than what's been done. We can't light big smoky piles right next to town and just pretend like there's not an issue. I have some notes on this, and I just want to get to those notes too. The air quality one is a tremendous one. Yeah. It's an important issue to me. When, as editor of the newspaper, I did a 5-part series on wood smoke, and I was amazed to find out that wood smoke not only contributes to lung disease, it also contributes to heart attacks. And so if we go back and think about people that have died in the wintertime in our community by heart attack, we think, oh my goodness, the smoke that we emit here is actually killing people. It's a huge health concern. However, what we need is a replacement. If wood stoves are the culprit, we need a replacement. And there's another one here too, and it's much, much harder to do, is create a culture of clean burning. And that's something we can say, we can bandy it about and say, we're gonna do education, we're gonna change the way that people burn. Changing habits is really, really hard. I just want to acknowledge that. So Michael, I'm sorry I don't have a better answer for this, but there's a number of ideas there that I think we can move forward on, and it is a big issue. As mayor, it certainly would be an issue for me.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there because, yeah, there are many paths we can go down on that particular topic, but it is something that needs to be dealt with. I've been here 6 years, and I've heard about it pretty much every winter throughout all those 6 years, and watched as the reports of dangerous, extremely dangerous, unhealthy, you might as well be dead breathing this air, reports have come in, right? And
Michael,
and
for
people
example,
just say, well, that's Valemount, we can't do anything about it.
Exactly.
I don't buy that.
And yet, I know some of my friends that burn say, hey, I think other people aren't getting dry firewood. And I mean, it behooves me. Why can't we get the community forest to supply dry firewood? Why can't we provide like affordable wood sheds to people? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, just keep that wood dry. I mean, these seem like some pretty simple ways of going forward. Anyways. Okay,
we'll leave it there and we'll move on. The fourth topic deals on leadership, communication, openness, transparency, and it's kind of a multi-part question as well. Position of mayor, and I don't need to tell you, requires numerous skills. You have to be a team builder, you have to be a leader, you have to have effective communications, you have to have the ability to present Valemount issues to various levels of government, sometimes very forcefully present those. You also have to have the willingness to listen and respond to the concerns of Valemount residents in an open, fair, and transparent manner. So we have two questions on this topic, and as I promised, the first one is with regards to Chief Administrative Officer, and you already said the Chief Administrative Officer, a very important position for those who don't know. That's the person that manages the affairs of the village, also has the manager of all the staff, and is the one person who reports directly to council and council's employee. In the last 4 years, there's been 7, I believe, CAOs or interim CAOs in the village, and that's resulted in hiring costs, termination costs, studies, as you mentioned, done, costs that are somewhat hidden, and that's the turnover cost and the cost of bringing someone up to speed, and the lost efficiency and operations and instability. If you're elected mayor, what would you do to avoid the constant turnover in this senior key CAO position?
We've got to get back to building a team. The first thing is going to be to recruit a CAO, to recruit a competent CAO. And I think because our council had a really good reputation for being a great employer, I think we can attract somebody amazing here. I just want to point out the person who underwent the $20,000 assessment by the current council, she went on to be the administrator in Smithers. They're about 10 times our size, and I understand she's thriving there, and I hear really good things about what's happening there. I hope that our relationship in developing Anne and helping her succeed would help us attract the next CAO.
Sorry.
No problem. So I hope that our reputation there would help attract CAO, and I think it would. I think people are excited about Valemount, but I think they're very tentative about working with the current council.
Okay, so what would you do differently?
So I would do what I did in the first term. That is, develop a trusting relationship with staff, to be open with them, to support them. Behind the scenes in council can be pretty tough. And as mayor, a new mayor with a new set of council, a lot of times council came and they were angry with staff and they wanted to have a session where all of council was there and the one staffer was there, and sort of, let them know that they were less than satisfied. And I think if you read any sort of management book, or you have any inkling about human nature at all, you know that just getting in together in a room and beating somebody up or talking about the challenges you're having is not a great way. So one of the things is feedback early and often. Talk about what's working and what's not. Being supportive, being in the office. You know, like your staff is there and they're working for you. And as mayor, you're not paid full time, but what you are is you're there to make sure things are working well. I mean, we're all invested in this. It's really important that council be successful. So, you know, I would engage those same tactics as early. Be respectful, be kind, be considerate. And when people need training, help them get it. If they're not hitting something out of the park, what do they need to be successful?
Right. One of the things that I have heard about a few of the CAOs that have come and gone relatively quickly here was the lack of housing. They come, they're family people, they come, they try to find a home here, they can't find anything, or they can't find anything suitable for a family,
yeah.
And they have to move on. I mean, that they may in fact love the job and love the community, but they just can't find what would happen. In some communities, they make that part of the benefit package that's offered to people in terms of providing a house that's owned by the village or subsidized or in some way helps them to get into the community and stay in the community. Is that something you would consider?
We need to tackle this housing issue for everybody. It's not just the CAO. Yes, absolutely. I mean, you know, we're back onto housing. I think that's okay because it's the biggest issue facing Valemount. In my own work as editor, I work at a newspaper and we are constantly going through staff as part of this housing thing. They love Valemount, they love their job, they love working with us, but things become untenable because of this housing piece. So it is huge. So housing, it's going to need to be a part, yeah, for sure. And if we're hiring a young person with a family, we need to make sure that works for them. So yeah. Michael, I'd say in this issue, just like all issues facing council, we need to solve the problems. You know what I'm saying? We need to help them. We need to help everybody get on board. So whether it's providing a house, whether it's scouting a house, yeah, we need to face it head on. We need to tackle the issues head on and not pretend like they don't exist. Well,
it requires maybe a little out of the box thinking, or a little at least paradigm shifting there on, you know, you have your most senior employee. You need to, you know, if you're an owner of a business and you're hiring a general manager, you want to make sure that that person is secure in their housing and their needs. Right?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, second part of this question is with regards to communication and leadership. So first of all, how would you describe your personal leadership style, and what would you plan to do if elected to effectively lead and build a strong team with the new council? And I preface that somewhat in that's one of the things that I hear from people out there is that they don't feel there's that synergy between mayor and council at the present time.
Right. Yeah, you asked a lot and then you added on to the end and then I forgot. Can you?
Sorry, there's two questions in one there, and one is how would you describe your leadership style?
I'm going to stop you there.
Okay. For those who don't know you, or who weren't here when you were last mayor, or perhaps something's different. I'll let you talk. Sorry.
I'm gonna speak about something personal here. When I grew up as a middle child, some people refer to the middle child as a diplomat, but that all ended for me when I was 13 because of family circumstances. Basically, my mom died of cancer, and it was at a time when my older siblings were going off to university or staying in high school, and Mom died and the family moved, and I went from being the middle child, kind of coddled in the middle, although helping out because, you know, we had Mom suffered with cancer for a long time, so we were generally good kids and tried not to fight too much and stuff. But when we moved to a new town, I was the eldest kid in a single parent family, and that was really, really different and very challenging. And I would say my leadership style is one of being a older brother, I would say. Yeah. It's about being kind and cajoling and getting people on board to help solve the problem. Yeah.
Okay. And what would you do to effectively, with that leadership style, to build a strong team for for this new upcoming council?
I think the best thing to build a strong team is just to shoot for the stars. Just say, what can we do? And I remember when we were recruiting Braden Hutchins here to Valemount. He's an extraordinary fellow, and he's now the corporate officer in Langford, which is a very big municipality just outside of Victoria, and a very hard-charging. They do a lot of things right, including affordable housing and housing in general. Recruiting Braden Hutchins here, he came out, he saw how remote it was, and he was thinking about whether or not he should stay. And I went and spoke to him. He was at a hotel, and he had done his interview and stuff, and I wasn't directly involved with that because it's council hires for the top position for the CAO, but we don't hire all of the other things, and you can probably see why, because it can create some tension. But I went to see Braden, and I said, Braden, I hear you're considering Valemount. What do you think? He said, well, it's interesting. I said, Braden, we're going to be doing great things here. You got to get on board with this. This is going to be amazing. You're a talented young guy, and I mean, he had come out top grades of doing a municipal program, and his father is a mayor. He had a long history in this, and he was just a top candidate. And I said, like, look, don't come here because it's easy. Don't come here because it's a high pay. Come here because it's an exciting place to be, and we're doing stuff you're going to get experience you won't get anywhere else. And that exists to this day. Valemount is still hard charging on all of these different files. Other municipalities would love to have a geothermal resource that potentially the municipality could play a role in untapping, of having a world-class destination just there. And you know, these guys, municipal people, planners and the like, people who would become a CAO, they are interested in solving the knotty problems that come with that. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, this is a real challenge that attracts really high quality people. And I think we got to do that. We can't just offer the highest pay. That's not going to work for us. What we need is the best talent, and we need them to be here for the right reasons.
Okay, great. We're running a little bit long, so I'm going to, I think, do an unusual thing here. We're going to take a little break, allow people to go refresh their beverages and themselves, and we will be right back. Thank you. Well, welcome back. Thank you for joining us again. We're here with Andru McCracken, candidate for mayor. So, Andru, I want to talk a little bit more about communication. During this council's term, no formal communications policy has been developed. Town hall meetings have been stopped. One of the media outlets in Valemount, it's not VCTV, has had trouble getting information provided by the current mayor. And council has not done anything at all that we can see to make it any easier to communicate with residents. For example, and this is a personal bugbear of mine, and that is, if you want to appear as a delegate to council, you have to have your application in by Thursday at noon.
Can I stop you here?
Sure.
Okay. Gordon, Michael, sorry. I've heard that concern before.
But you don't know what the concern is yet? I haven't said it.
No.
Okay.
I think I do.
All
I'm
right.
sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't want you to preempt this, and I want to be the guy to say something, because I've got a policy idea.
All right,
and
go ahead.
No, I've seen this done in McBride. Public comment is at the beginning of the council meetings in McBride. Mm-hmm. And what happens is, when that option is available, people who have some knowledge or dog in the fight, who've got something to contribute, they show up to the council meeting and are able, without putting something on the agenda, to speak to the issue before it's considered by council. As mayor, I have been in the situation where we ruled on something. We passed a bylaw or made a policy decision, only to have somebody say something in the public comment session that called that into question. That wasn't considered. And that's not right. That's not the spirit of council.
Right.
I'm sorry for cutting you mid-stretch, but I just wanted to present that. It's actually an idea that we have spoken about personally. You've called attention to this idea of, like, getting on the agenda is so difficult. And anyways, I want you to finish presenting the rest of your concerns.
You kind of captured there's the two parts to that. My second part was the public comments, and what is the point of having a public comment when you're really just commenting favorably or unfavorably on something that may have already been ruled on, rather than having input into perhaps the decision-making process, which is what council is supposed to be. You're representatives of the residents, right, in terms of that. So I think that is an important thing. In terms of a communication strategy, that and getting on the agenda, the delegation request has to be in by noon, but yet the agenda doesn't come out till Friday afternoon.
Right.
So you're not even certain what's on the agenda.
Yeah.
And if your comments at that point are even timely or not, right? So that and the lack of town hall and the lack of communication strategy in general, I think, is something that has been negative for council since I've been here, and I think it needs to be something addressed to get people more engaged, because frankly, I've had a lot of people tell me they just don't go because they don't feel they're being heard. Yeah. Right? And they don't participate in the process because they don't feel they're being heard.
That's awful.
Yeah, that is awful. And I think in a small community like this, we all have so much information that we could share with each other to make more informed decisions. So.
Yeah, and we got to realize we are not a full-time professional council, right? Like, we all have to do other jobs in order to be councillors, and so that means we might not always be the best, or staff may not have turned over everything. I mean, let's be open. Yeah, let's be open to being excellent, right? And let's engage the community. I just want to say, if you look at any of the important things that have happened during, I'm going to say from 2011 till now, things that have really turned the community around, not a one of them did not come from the community at large. Somebody had a good idea. Somebody had a passion. Somebody had an idea for a business. These are turning the community around, right? So that's got to be a signal to us, is that if there's genius in Valemount, it's in the people that live here. I feel it. That's why I live here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I understand that from just a logistic point of view, you can't have, 30 people in a room all getting up and talking for 5 minutes. Your council meetings would last for hours every time. Yeah. However, there's happy medium there somewhere.
Well, and we can see typically how few people come to the public comment. If they're there to talk about something. They've got something to say. And so I think one of the things that we see, it's tough to be chair. It's tough to be a kind, concerned chair that's able to turn off the mic. We saw that at the forum last night. Sometimes people, some people may think they're going out of scope or out of whatever. So a chair's job is to sort of try to focus that. Communicate with the person that's trying to talk. Get what it is out of them in a timely way, and try to bring that to the meeting. Right. But being a chair, being mayor, takes courage. You have to get in there and get dirty. And so I think having that public comment session at the end has been a really safe thing for council, but it's not been good.
Right. It doesn't foster communication, for sure. Yeah. Let's move on to our fifth topic, conflict of interest. On May the 26th of 2015, village staff presented Policy 64 to Council, which was an enhanced local conflict of interest policy for councils as recommended by the BC Solicitor General. The Local Government Management Association of BC and the Union of BC Municipalities believe that enhanced clarifications of conflict of interest guidelines may be necessary now in light of the BC Court of Appeals Schlenker decision, which I'm not sure if you're familiar, it's two councillors from Salt Spring Island that were found to be in conflict in an unusual situation, have introduced a number of considerations for staff and elected officials when determining when elected officials may be in a conflict of interest, and some of those are contrary to what's found in the community charter, which we're using now. Policy 64 was narrowly adopted by a 3-2 vote, so this is the enhanced set of guidelines. Councillor Reimer and Mayor Townsend opposed. January 12th, 2016, Policy 64 was rescinded, so just 6 months later, by a 3-1 vote with only Councillor Salt opposing, with the recommendation that they go back to the conflict of interest guidelines found in the Charter. No explanation as to why, but that was what it was. So the question I have for you is, do you believe the conflict of interest guidelines stronger than those found in the Community Charter are necessary now? And if so, would you support once again putting forth a locally tailored set of conflict of interest guidelines and definitions?
I read through Policy 64. I don't know what the problem was with it. Honestly, it is a little bit frightening because it didn't go that far. In fact, I showed it to friends and they thought, this has a few gray areas in it. That was their response. It wasn't that exhaustive. So you know, because the Schlenker decision happened while we were in council, and we were at UBCM, we went to forums, NCLGA, we were all apprised of what was going on. For me, it was really clear. Conflict of interest is a huge thing. We have to be way more careful. Like, look, it's not just the idea that a councillor or an organization that they're associated would get ahead. It's not just that. It's a risk to the municipality. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
It is actually, you could damage, they could be up for a lawsuit. It's important to manage this well too. For me, I'm really sensitive to a conflict of interest. As a child growing up, my father worked in the school district, and as a result, all of my friends were able to get jobs in the school district, but not me. And every time I went to put in my application, my dad said, "No way, you're not getting it, because we don't play that kind of game in our family. We play straight up." And when I first became mayor, I wasn't a rich man. I was working, I had your job here. I was a station manager, so I made anyways, sorry. I'm just sort of like thinking about what this means.
Yeah,
but anyways, it's a modest sum, and I didn't have a ton of savings. But when the opportunity for being mayor came up, I was like, okay, because I will likely sit on the regional district, and the regional district has control of the budget for this place, I think it's in good taste. It's a good decision for me not to continue on in my job, even though it's. There's a board of directors that governs VCTV and the Valemount Entertainment Society. It just felt wrong, and I think we need we need strong leadership in council to really put a spotlight on that for council, to say, if you're a councillor, you probably shouldn't be doing any work for the Valemount Community Forest. It's not that we want to deprive you of work. Just find work somewhere else. Do you know what I'm saying? Right. Like, tell your buddies, hey, I can't get work here. Can I come work for you on this thing? It's not that people are benefiting unfairly. It's that it looks bad, and really, it exposes the municipality to a bunch of dangers. And you saw during the Schlenker case that Salt Spring Island, the trust went through a period of hell. Let's not bring that upon our municipality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's. I read some of the legal decisions coming out after that, and what I found interesting is everyone knows that's been involved with societies and boards, etc., that you don't have anything to do with financial decisions. So you walk away from that, and that's common sense. They understand it. And even though people walk away from it, if they're on the executive, if they're on the board of directors, they say, okay, well, that's maybe even a little too close. Mm-hmm. Now they're saying, even if you're a member of a society, you may be in conflict, because as a member of a society, one of the society's goals is to improve itself, and as a member of a society, you're affecting your board of directors.
Absolutely.
It's a gray area, and I know it's hard, and people know it's hard in a small community because everyone's involved in so many different organizations, et cetera, but I just really don't understand what happened with the Conflict of Interest Policy 64 and why they went back to the conflict charter, that's a conflict that's in the community charter, when they were advised against it because it wasn't strong enough. Mm-hmm. So the question was, just let's boil it down. Do you support stronger guidelines?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. That's easy. We could have finished that conversation 20 minutes ago. All right, topic 6, rainbow crosswalk. So, and inclusion. According to the Georgia Straight newspaper in Vancouver, as of June 11th of this year, there are 42 rainbow crosswalks in the province. Mm-hmm. On July the 26th, 2016, Council voted against installing a rainbow crosswalk here, citing cost and safety concerns as the rationale for that, declining it. Prince George installed theirs, which is a multifaceted one crosses, I think, 4 corners on their streets there, at a cost of $6,000 using a cold fusion technology, which is a long-lasting plasticized kind of thing. You probably know about it. Prince Rupert installed theirs for a cost of $1,850, just paint and rollers kind of thing. I recall at the time when council was debating this, volunteers offered to raise money to pay for the paint and do the painting themselves and do the upkeep of the painting every year as needed, but that was turned down. A study conducted by the City of Edmonton with regards to the safety issue showed that there had been no safety problems with the 6 crosswalks that they have in Edmonton as well, rainbow crosswalks. They found that the crosswalks did not decrease pedestrian safety in any way. Our research shows that Valemount is one of only 3 communities in BC to vote against rainbow crosswalks. Now, there are some that have not brought it to the table yet, but Valemount, Merritt, and Campbell River, are the 3 communities that have voted against it. The question is, given that rainbow crosswalks are seen as a recognition that a community is considered LGBTQ2+ friendly, if elected, would you support the installation of a rainbow crosswalk on a Valemount public street, and why or why not?
Yeah. So, when that was brought to council, a young man wrote a letter. It was read by his mom. And he talked about being a gay kid in high school and how that impacted him. And so I'm gonna change your question, okay? To me, all of these other considerations that were brought up, all of this stuff about we want a rainbow crosswalk or we can't have a rainbow crosswalk, somebody in the chamber said, when I was a boy, I was gay, and I felt so excluded from my community, I wanted to kill myself. So that for me is a big, big deal, because I don't care who you are, I don't want you to kill yourself. I don't want anybody to kill themselves based on the feeling of being excluded. So, okay, so we got this perfect political football, the rainbow crosswalk, and I don't think it was meant like that. I think when it was brought forward to council, the idea was, let's show people who are gay that they are welcome in this community, gay and lesbian, and transgender. And I was so disappointed in my community because I felt, I didn't think it'd be an issue at all. I mean, my experience of Valemount has been very different. I'm a white male, so, but I've always been amazed, and I have my own personal story about how inclusive the community has been. If the rainbow crosswalk is the answer to young people or people in the community who are feeling excluded, not doing self-harm, then yes, I support it. I want to add some texture to this though. I don't want the village to be just the progressive left. Like, I moved to a diverse logging community in the mountains, and what I loved about Valemount right from the beginning was their ability to really get into stuff. As a reporter moving here, I was fascinated with questions around the environment, because you have all these loggers who are living on hillsides below cut blocks, and they had to deal with the impact of logging on their water supply. And it created this wonderful, you know, look, I don't want to bring, I want, as mayor, I would like to show care for the people that are in my community. I want everybody to feel accepted. Is the rainbow crosswalk the way to do that? Honestly, why has there been this big backlash to it, and what does it represent for the other people that are there? I'm gonna add a little bit of texture to this. I saw it done well once. I was in a small community in Montana, and the locals there were telling me about their gay pride parade. And it was crazy. And this town is not particularly gay, but what I loved about their gay pride celebration was it was a reaction, a Montanan authentic reaction to anybody telling them who they should be or why. And I really appreciate that approach. And I think the reason that the crosswalk has offended people and some people in Valemount, and it worked up a movement against it. It really got people motivated. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if what that's about is that people feel railroaded into something. So what I want to say here is that principle behind the rainbow crosswalk, the impulse that Mandy presented it with, that idea that we want people to feel included, that is so precious to me. And I mean, if we want to look at that, for sure, let's take a look at it. But I really want everybody to feel included.
Okay. Let's move on to another timely topic, cannabis. So cannabis becomes, recreational use of cannabis becomes legal in less than 2 weeks, I believe, October the 17th. It could potentially have a major impact here in Valemount on a number of fronts. We'll get to that in a second. Municipalities across Canada are struggling. They're considering their options. I read a list of them on Global BC website. It runs the gamut of banning sales outright to only government stores to combinations of them to you name it. Confusion reigns, let's put it that way, right, in terms of this. It's a two-part question for you. So if elected as mayor, would you support and encourage entrepreneurs to start up marijuana retail outlets in Valemount? Or, it's kind of a three-or question here. Are you in favor of supporting only sales through the BC government cannabis stores? Or are you in favor of banning the sale of recreational marijuana in Valemount outright?
Well, I like that this is a multiple choice. It makes it a very unwieldy conversation easier. Could I point to when you have the pleasure of being an elected official, one of the great things that happens to you is that the taxpayers send you away to conferences where very smart people have considered these issues and made policy. I'm really disappointed that council has brought nothing to the table so far. I would just want to be honest with you. I haven't had the benefit of going to those forums. I don't have the benefit of what the experts say. I have a 2-year-old at home. I don't have a ton of time. So this hasn't been a really high priority for me, and I'm sorry. And if I've disappointed the people of Valemount, I will just take that on the chin. But there are 2 ways that council could have done better. One, they could have paid attention and showed up to the workshops in UBCM and brought home some policy recommendations. 2, they could have employed a strong staff that would help them develop policies. This is really in the wheelhouse of staff. So it's really disappointed to see that here we are rolling right into it and actually pass it by the time the election happens, and by the time the next council is sworn in, we'll be well past it. And we've got nothing to show. And I think I'm all about looking at best practices, of coming up with good solutions. I think any short-term solutions, I think we need to be careful about committing too long because we don't really know what the impacts would be. I also recognize that if we're dealing with business owners or investors, they're going to want a sort of a sense of certainty. I mean, yeah, we need a strong village team to deal with issues like this, and it's too bad that we don't have one right now.
Right. But in terms of this issue, you don't feel you have enough information yet to make an informed decision as to what your preference would be one way or the other?
I don't.
I think that's fair. I mean, there hasn't been a lot of information provided yet. It is unfortunate that, that in 2 weeks the doors open and we have the situation, not only in terms of sales, but in terms of usage in public areas. So, for example, I've been led to believe that cannabis use is going to be treated somewhat like alcohol use, in that you wouldn't be walking down the street smoking a joint. It's just like you wouldn't be carrying a beer and drinking it down the street, or in a public park, or near schools, or those types of things. So there are 3 kind of areas I see for council to be dealing with. One of them is the sales aspect of it. One of them is the usage aspect of it. And the third is the growth aspect of it, and actual growing. And that brings me to the other question here, the second part of this question. What do you believe should be the laws on cannabis growing in Valemount, or have you had time to consider that as well? I know that the Act, I believe, calls for 4 personal plants, if I'm not mistaken.
I think we need to keep Valemount growing. Sorry, excuse the humor. Do you know, we dealt with some of this when the federal government legalized growing some plants. As a council, we felt the repercussions of that. In that case, we were really hamstrung because the feds basically made rules in our jurisdiction, and we didn't have a way of dealing with that. So you raised some really good issues, and what I'm going to say is, Valemount could suffer as a community as a result of us not having rules around this, because if people start growing in a way that, marijuana seems to have such an intense smell associated with it, people might start growing, and we may be in a position where we can't do anything about it because we haven't led we've been just following. I mean, I'm surprised that council has not, has just done nothing.
Right. The other side to this is, and it's kind of hard for me personally, having grown up, well, you too, having grown up in a culture where it's been illegal, to now say, okay, well, you know, in 2 weeks we're going to be able to sell this. Of course, you're going to have to be licensed, and you're going to have all those things. But the idea that this could actually be an economic stimulator, you know, one of those small industries that you talked about here could be, you know, a retail outlet, online retail, growth. If you can, you know, you probably wouldn't be able to grow a field of marijuana in the village, but maybe you could get a permit to do it in the regional district as an agricultural cash crop.
Yeah.
Number of options, hemp, you know, byproducts of cannabis kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people will object to it just on personal biases from years of it being illegal, but we kind of have to make that turn, I think, and start thinking of, you know, it's just like, it's probably just like when alcohol was introduced on a retail basis, right? It was like, oh, that's, you know, that's a sin, we can't have that sold publicly. And then it was like, well, we can make a lot of money from this, right?
Right.
So, I mean, it's one of those things where you have to protect the residents, you have to protect the youth, but it's legal, and do you get involved or not?
Yeah. So I think the approach has to be one of a tremendous amount of integrity. I think you got to tackle it head on. I think we need to look at what other people are doing and see what works.
And perhaps consultations with community, maybe town hall forums, that type of thing. Do you need input from people? So
we sort of skipped over this, but during my 3-year tenure as mayor, we held community conversations on a yearly basis, and I was really proud of that. In fact, sometimes we did it semi-annually. What a community conversation does is incredible. Now, not everybody is completely happy with the community conversation or the resulting policy as a result of that. And we committed to some crazy things. Like, we were going to answer all of the questions that people brought up, and they brought up 1 million questions, and it presented a big a problem for staff. But I want to tell you, that is how I like to do things. I like to, and I've proven it. And it took a lot of convincing to get council to say, we're going to stand up in front of a room full of people and entertain their questions willy-nilly and not control what they're going to say and just have an open forum. But we did it, and I think it's good. I think in the future, I think we could do it much better. I think a small group forum would be way better for both council and for people. And I think we need more of it. And look at where we are. Like, people here are brilliant. They've got brilliant ideas. They're coming up with solutions to our problems. So let's do it. So the marijuana issue is no different.
Okay. Two more quick questions for you, and then we're going to let you go here. This one is on traffic congestion, believe it or not, in Valemount, and/or parking issues. Yeah. What are your thoughts regarding the traffic congestion and parking issues on Caris Drive, specifically around the corner of 5th and Caris there, and the Main Street business area with the Swiss Bakery and people kind of parking and going in and out dangerously kind of on the road there? Yeah. What do you feel needs to be done to improve the situation?
Well, we're a small town, but that doesn't make that intersection any less dangerous. Like, on a long weekend, it is a zoo. It is crazy. So we need better traffic planning. We need to work it out. You know, one thing about a high-performing council is that you can walk the line between being a governance body and having influence on what private property owners do on their thing, on their land. And I think we've got an occasion, like, say, at the Petrocan, you can see how there's sort of a dangerous approach into the building, that people coming out of the parking lot get really close and sort of, let's just say it's a very dynamic intersection, and a lot of really interesting things happen there. But I honestly think by working with landowners, I think we can solve it. And there might be, you know, maybe it's something where we have to actually put a little bit of money in it, but let's be honest, lives are at stake.
They are. Yeah, I've been in A&W watching things that I never thought I'd ever see. For example, somebody coming down Highway 5, instead of stopping at the traffic light, taking the turn off onto 5th and then immediately turning onto avoiding the traffic and going back onto the highway, not even slowing down.
Wow.
70K.
Oh my
like
goodness.
That, right? And you got, in the summertime, you got tour buses with people walking on both sides of the street. You got ingress and egress from from Tim Hortons and Petrocan. It is a dangerous situation.
I just want to point out, and I mean, probably to some applause and much derisiveness, it was during my time that we actually finally got a traffic light. Previous council had worked so long and so hard just to get a flashing crosswalk light. And it was amazing that our efforts paid off, and part of it's to do with Valemount growing, but finally we got that traffic light. But there's more work to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, since we're running long, I'm going to go right into your individual questions. So this one's been written specifically for you. What did you take, and you actually talked about this in your opening statement, what did you take away from your previous term as mayor? And what lessons, if any, did you learn in that defeat and in the 4 years since then that would change the way you would lead if elected mayor this time?
That is a great question. I really thank you for that. And I think you did it. You may have had some public input to it, so whoever was helped with that, I really appreciate it. I have a habit of being sanctimonious. I am the editor of a newspaper, and not by accident. You know, editors sometimes make sweeping judgments about things and sort of back them up with a few facts. What I found early on, it was a lesson I learned early, but it was too late, was that you can't afford to make any enemies. If somebody comes to you and presents you something that you don't like or you think feels dirty, as mayor, it's not for you to judge, and it's not for you, obviously, to never do anything under the table or anything like that. But you have to respect where people are coming from. And you got to remember, whoever is in the community that comes to your door, whether they're asking you to go to a prayer breakfast, whether they're asking you to do something near their hotel, or they're asking you for something, and to you as that person, that may say, okay, I'm not really sure where this is going, or boy, I have some regrets, because people that are in there for asking for things of council, or of the mayor specifically in this case, they're movers and shakers in this community, and they can get a lot done. And they've helped build the community, and they're good people. And we need to work with everybody. And, you know, when we spoke about the crosswalk, the rainbow crosswalk, and I know a lot of people are looking for me to say, Andrew, you're a progressive guy. You understand this thing. You understand at what stake for youth and people in the community. Gord, I guess what I've learned is you gotta make a big tent. We need everybody pulling in the same direction. And so you gotta be careful about doing things that engage part of the population but isolate the other part of the population. And so I'm sure there's a way to do all of these things. I really do. But one thing I learned from my last term is don't close the tent. Don't make it small. You want everybody in there contributing, pulling. And I think that's part of this thing when I get back to this sort of culture of yes. It's just a better way of looking at things. Don't say no. Don't say no, I won't go to your prayer breakfast, or no, I can't do this for your hotel or whatever. What can you do? And how do you keep those people engaged? And if they're coming to you because they want you to do something to help them be successful, maybe that's not the right thing to do, but maybe there's something else you can do to keep them successful. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much for answering the questions. We're going to give you, like we did at the beginning, we're going to give you 3 minutes now to either look into the camera or look at me and say what you want to say in your closing remarks whenever you're ready.
Yeah.
I am going to have to keep you to 3 minutes, though, because we are running terribly long.
I'll be shorter than that.
Okay.
I want to thank everybody for watching the video, and I want to thank for the opportunity to speak directly. And Michael, thanks a lot for all the prep work that you've done. I'm sorry for calling you multiple names and, and revealing how little you make as a
I don't think it's a surprise to anyone.
It's not a surprise. It's a very small town. Look, whoever is elected needs to be accountable to the people of Valemount, and I aim to be. And on October 20th, consider casting your vote for me, Andru McCracken, as mayor.
Great. Well, that was very brief. Thank you very much for that. I want to just tell people or encourage people to get out and vote. They do have two opportunities. There is an advance voting day, which is Wednesday, October the 10th, and hours will be from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., and that is in the Village Council Chambers at 735 Cranberry Lake Road. The general voting day, as Andrew mentioned a moment ago, is Saturday, October the 20th, and the same hours from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., and that will be at the Valemount Community Hall, which is at 101 Gore Street, just next to us here. Andrew, thank you very much.
Yeah,
appreciate your candor in answering all those questions, and best of luck in the campaign.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.